Back in the dead of winter in 9936, a timber cutter walked straight out of a shut-down logging camp deep in the northern woods. All he took with him was a heavy wool coat, a hand axe, and not a single clue where he was going to sleep. The thermometer nailed to the camp office door read 34 below zero. If you have ever been stuck out in the freezing timber with no tent, no cabin, and nobody coming to pull you out, pull up a chair and listen close. He had 11 miles of frozen wilderness sitting between him and the nearest heated room. And every logger who watched him walk off figured they would be pulling his frozen body out of a snowdrift by Wednesday. They found him on Thursday, standing on his own 2 feet. He had covered 6 miles, carved a trench right in the snow beside a stand of spruce, roofed it over with evergreen, boughs and a foot of pack powder, and slept 2 nights in there with a small fire burning just outside the entrance. When folks asked him how in the world he pulled it off, he said his grandpa had shown him how to do it just once when he was 9 years old. If you drop most modern Americans in those exact same woods today with that exact same axe, they would never see the morning light. We know how to spend $400 on a fancy tent,
6
but we have completely forgotten how to sleep on frozen dirt when the weather is trying to take our lives. But here is where the story takes a turn. Official records eventually proved that Logger's grandfather was dead on target. Military survival guides confirmed it, cold, weather experts confirmed it, and somewhere between his generation and ours. 25 distinct ways to stay alive without paying for a roof were quietly wiped right out of our vocabulary. Before we move forward, there is a reality facing this country that you will not hear on the evening news until it is already sitting on your porch. It all comes down to a single number: 3 days. That is how much food the local grocery stores actually hold for you. Your grandfather's pantry held enough to survive an entire winter. The difference was never about money. It was about knowing what to do. 94 pages of that exact knowledge are packed into a single guide covering water, fire, curing, canning, along with the wild plants that heal and the ones that kill. You can find the link down in the description. Now, let us get back to the matter at hand. I am a 50 native, born 7th generation on land my family settled in the Mennonites and never left. Nearly every single trick I am about to list was hammed, copied by my grandfather into a leather journal back when he was raising 8. Kids off these hills, and he made me promise those old ways would not die with me. This is me holding up my end of the bargain. These are 25 forgotten shelter skills, and I am going to give you 3 of them right now, so you know why you ought to stick around.
You can find the link down in the description.
4 was tested and confirmed in a 999 military field manual to keep you right around freezing when the air outside drops to 40 below zero. Number 6 is some forestry officials would slap a heavy fine on you for building today, even though your great-grandfather put one up every single night on the trap line. And number 3 is a skill that fewer than 100 survival instructors in this whole country still know how to teach properly. Yet, it is the one decision that determines whether the other 20. 4, save your life or fail you completely. None of these methods vanished because they stopped working.
Yet it is the one decision
they
that
vanished
determines
because
whether
somebody
the
made a fortune the day you forgot them and started dropping $400 on a sheet of synthetic nylon.
And it is likely
you cannot blame yours for that. Those companies are remarkably good at selling.
And started dropping
Before we jump into the list,
on a sheet
go
of
ahead and hit
synthetic
subscribe. Not for my sake.
You cannot blame yourself for
but
that.
because we are dragging forgotten knowledge back into the light, and you are going to want to catch what comes next. Let us count these down starting from 25. The real question isn't just what we lost, but who profited when we forgot how to sleep under the open sky, and how you can reclaim that independence one skill at a time. Number 25, the brush lean tip. That simple shelter built from fallen branches and evergreen boughs with a low fire burning out front is the classic starting point, and
which
it is
equaled a full
likely
day's
the
hard
exact
labor for a
structure
mountain
you
worker back
envision.
then.
You set up two forked upright posts, lay a ridge pole across them, lean sturdy saplings against the frame, and layer spruce boughs from the bottom up just like roof shingles. Back in 1944, an early scout manual showed how two young boys could build one in under 2 hours. A factory made canvas tent in a mail order catalog that same year cost $2.25, which equaled a full day's hard labor for a mountain worker back then. This natural shelter cost nothing except the time it took to gather the boughs. Here is how you replicate it. Keep a small fire 4 feet from the opening and stack a wall of green logs right behind the flames to reflect the warmth back at you. You will be sitting warmer than most people holding a commercial tent, which is precisely why that design was quietly dropped from the training books. The next one was erased from memory entirely. Number 24, the snow trench. This involves carving a body-wide slot straight into wind-packed drift, lining the floor with spruce boughs, laying small poles across the top, and packing another layer of boughs and a foot of dense snow over the roof. You slide inside, just like pulling out a drawer. A 939 military guide on winter movements stated plainly that a properly built snow shelter maintains an internal temperature near 32 degrees, even when the outside air plunges to 40 below zero. 32 degrees above zero inside solid snow. My grandfather wrote about this tech during the winter of 9952. Note his own father picked it up from a northern logger in a timber camp. And what took its place? Commercial gear outfitters convincing you to buy a $500 high-altitude tent that a sudden mountain gale can tear to shreds before your snow trench even settles. Outdoor gear companies get one more mention before the target shifts, so stay tuned. Number 23, the settler pole and bough shelter. This is the heavier, sturdier cousin of the standard lean-to, and it was one of the first structures stripped from youth outdoors curricula. While early 20th century scouting guide taught the build step-by-step revisions by the late 1950s had replaced those illustrations entirely with images of store-bought pup tents. Retail outfitters were manufacturing gear by then, and not a single business earned a dime off a kid who knew how to frame a roof using nothing but a hatchet. Nobody made it illegal. They simply stopped printing the instructions. Soon enough, folks were paying $240 for a bag full of collapsible poles. You saw the price tag and paid it. Just like everyone else in the county, you cannot be blamed when the marketing is that persuasive. That was a case of gear replacing knowledge. This next one was pushed out by the power companies. Number 22, banking a fire. Your great-grandmother likely did this every single evening of her life without ever thinking of it as a specialized survival skill. You rake the glowing coals into a tight pile and sprinkle a layer of ash over the top, just enough to restrict the airflow without smothering the heat entirely. In the morning, you brush the ash aside, feed a strip of birch bark in the glowing center, and the fire your family relied on stays alive. A 9 Federal Agricultural Bulletins described the exact process in a short paragraph. The process, but as electric heating was marketed aggressively through the 1940s and 50s, utility grids spread everywhere. By 1965, a 1966 overnight fire was viewed like a relic of the past. She wasn't outdated. She was completely self-sufficient. That is a distinction people work very hard to erase. That covers managing the fire itself. This next trick is about the mattress underneath it. Number 21, the debris hut. You place a main ridgepole between two forked stakes, then lean shorter sticks along the sides to form a tight, low A-frame. Next comes a step most folks mess up. You heap leaves, dry grass, and dead ferns over the exterior until it looks like a massive mound of yard waste, creating 2 to 3 feet of loose, trapped air insulation. You leave a tiny crawl entrance that can be plugged with a tight-bound bundle of leaves and lay down another 6 inches of dried foliage inside as a sleepy mat. A 2-in-2 military survival manual lists this as one of the warmest single-person shelters an individual can construct by hand.
Quick walk around
Mountain
your
history
campsite
records
before
show
dropping your
local
pack.
boys building leaf
Environmental
shelters,
conservation
just like
reports
this
confirm
back
that a
in the
solid natural
993
windbreak reduces
What
wind
replaced
speeds
it? A synthetic bivouac sack selling for $80. It relies on the exact same physics, just pulling money from a different pocket. Speaking of pockets, this next Smith used to belong to the exact same space that sleeping pad manufacturer took over. Number 22. Snoke a trench. You carve a snow cave into deep, firmly packed drift. You dig a small entry hole low down, hollow out the interior into dome shape, and elevate your sleeping bench higher than the entrance so the heaviest cold air drops in the lower trench beneath you. Finally, you poke a fist-sized ventilation hole through the roof to keep fresh air circulating. A 99 and 50 military cold, Weather Guide noted that a properly designed snow cave maintains a stable 32 degrees inside when it is 30 below outside. I constructed my first one when I was 14 years old. My grandfather sat on a stump watching me the whole time without saying a word, letting me handle the entire build mice. Then he watched the roof collapse right on top of me at 3 in the morning. It was wet, heavy snow, and I hadn't allowed the structure time to settle and freeze solid. I was buried up to my shoulders and laughing so hard I could barely catch my breath. He looked down and said, "Well, now you'll remember." And I sure did. Here is our first pause in the pattern. This is where the story shifts from traditional bushcraft into clear reason why somebody got rich. Every survival skill listed so far costs absolutely nothing. Every single commercial replacement requires a paycheck. That isn't a coincidence. It is a business model. Let us keep moving down the list. Number 19. Using natural windbreaks. Before you start build a single thing, you have to read the wind. A fish show weathers a 15-mile-per-hour breeze at 0 degrees Fahrenheit feels like 19 below zero against bare skin. You cut that wind down to 5 miles per hour by tucking your position behind a dense thicket, a rock face, or a thick stand of young evergreens. That temperature feels like 7 below. That is a 12-degree gain in survival warmth just from taking a quick walk around your campsite before dropping your pack. Environmental conservator reports confirm that a solid natural windbreak reduces wind speeds by 50 to 80% on the sheltered side. Your great-grandfather didn't need a wind chill chart to figure that out. He simply watched where the snow was drifting and put his back to the shelter. That is what you sow before you start digging. This next method is what families across the open plains relied on instead of digging trenches. Number 18, the sod dugout. Out on the western prairies in 8885, a homesteading family carved a room straight in the side of a dirt creek bank, laid willow poles across the top, and stacked thick slabs of prairie sod right over the structure until the grass kept growing on their roof. Snow piled up outside, while the temperature inside stayed above freezing all winter long without costing a dime. A standard wood frame house in that region back then required $200 to $300 worth of milled lumber that most homesteaders simply didn't have. But as railroad lines expanded and commercial lumberyards moved in, banks began refusing to finance anything other than modern timber houses, rejecting earth-built homes entirely. When National Research Labs tested earth, sheltered structures decades later, they admitted that sod dugouts used a small fraction of heating fuel required by a stand frame house. Your ancestors weren't primitive. They understood practical physics. The timber industry simply wanted to sell them lumber. Where gear companies sold foam pads to replace the earth, this next trick replaced heavy timber. Number 17, the deadfall log shelter. When a massive tree blows over in a storm, most people see an obstruction. A woodsman back in 9.5 saw half a completed shelter. You lean sturdy branches from the top of the fallen trunk down to the ground on the leeward side, throw a heavy layer of boughs over the poles, and you have a solid shelter in 20 minutes that takes less effort than pitching a commercial tent. Modern military field guides still teach this exact setup. The only strict rule is verify that the trunk is firmly anchored so it won't roll over on you during the night. My grandfather wrote about a mountain trapper back in 9941 who slept beside a fallen spruce every night for 6 weeks on the trail without ever pitching a sheet of canvas. 6 full weeks without a tent. And for this next one, you don't need a tent or a lean to frame it all, just standing poles and evergreen boughs. Number 16, the evergreen bough bed. The frozen earth drains heat from your body far faster than the open air. A person lying directly on cold ground with a high-end sleeping bag will still wake up shivering. Early 20th century outdoor guides refer to the traditional fix as a browse bed. You take short balsam or spruce tips, cut to 12 or 18 inches and lay them overlap like shingles. Cut ends pointing down, soft needles face up, stack 4 to 6 inches deep. Mail order catalogs,
a traveler
mail
walking
folded
between
canvas
towns
back
in the
then
19th
for
century
$3.50.
who didn't have the 25
but
to 50
experienced
cents charged
outdoorsmen
by
knew
a
the
day.
bough bed was warmer. Then in 971, a commercial manufacturer patented the self-inflating sleeping pad. Today, folks hand over $9 for the exact same insulation that a spruce grove provides for free. Same thermal principle, different wallet. While pad manufacturer took over the mattress, stove company targeted the next tradition. Number 15, the spruce pole tent. Long before cheap canvas was everywhere, northern trappers built full A-frame shelters entirely out of sturdy spruce. Poles lashed together at the peak, then thatched them top to bottom with overlapping boughs or thick slabs of tree bark. Packing snow around the base, sealed out the draft, and a small fire sat right at the entrance. Old woodsmen recorded men living comfortably in these structures for entire winter trapping seasons. Then factory canvas became cheap, followed by light nylon, and the same gear makers mentioned earlier made fortunes selling portable shelters you have to pack in and haul out. A pole tent can simply be left behind, and the forest reclaims the natural materials when it's season. That isn't primitive living. That is leaving zero footprint. The forest takes the shelter back, but this neck trick gives you a solid wall of heat at your back. Number 14, the log fire reflector. An open campfire radiates heat in every direction, wasting half of its energy in the open sky. By stacking green logs in a low wall 4 to 5 feet long and 3 or 4 logs high on the far side of the fire, every single bit of radiant heat that would have been lost to the dark bounces right back in your shelter. Early outdoorsmen illustrated this exact setup in 997. It effectively doubles the usable heat output of a small fire. Retail catalogs at the time sold portable camp stoves for $5 to $10, but a reflector wool required only 30 minutes of hatchet work. The single absolute rule here is to use green wood only. Dried timber will
under
catch
heavy
fire.
stones,
That
and then
log
lashed
wall
to a timber
returns
pole frame.
Heat, and this next method lets you carry that warmth right into your bed.
In winter to form
Here is our
weatherproof
second
walls and roof
pause in the
panels.
narrative. Look closely
Indigenous
at the pattern.
peoples shared
Every
this
single
technique
method
with early
covered
fur
so far
trappers.
was replaced by an item you are expected to buy. Every single one. A free, self-reliant skill gets discarded, and a priced product takes its place. Nobody passed a law forcing it to happen. They simply stopped teaching your grandfather's solutions and started advertising their own. Let us keep moving down the list.
Because
Number
their kids slept
13,
in heated frame
hated
cabins.
stones. You take dry,
My
fist-sized
grandfather noted
rocks
this
and place them
technique
near
in
the
his
glowing
journal
coals
back
of your
in the
fire
hut.
for about an hour. Once heated, you wrap them in a layer of wool cloth and slide them down in the foot of your sleeping roll before climbing
Buying
in.
a utility tarp
Old
today
woodsmen
will cost you
documented this
20
standard
bucks.
practice back in 997, and grandmothers used it
Gathering
on
a slab
freezing
of
nights
natural
for
bark
generations.
cost your ancestors a single
Then
afternoon.
rubber hot water
That was
bottles
overhead
gained
shelter. This
popularity
next one
around
sits right under your
9900,
feet.
followed by electric blankets in the 1930s. and a simple piece of granite that had warmed human sleepers for thousands of years was put on a shelf. But hear this warning, because my grandpa was dead serious about it. Never, under any circumstances, use wet river rocks. Trapped moisture inside a river stone turns to steam when heated, building pressure until the rock explodes like shrapnel. Use dry landstones
It's a chamber
only.
dug 4 to
That
6
is the
feet
entire
down
rule
into
for
the
carrying
dirt,
heat with you.
thick walls and an earthen
This next
roof,
method
where the
shows how to
ground
catch a
naturally
night's
holds a
rest
stable
using
temperature
structure you
between
don't even own. Number 12. The fence corner shelter. A traveler walking between towns in the 19th century who didn't have the 25 to 50 cents charged by a rural inn would look for a split, rail fence corner on open land. By leaning a wooden board or a heavy bundle of brush across the meeting rails to form a makeshift roof and stuffing the gaps with loose straw, you could sleep dry through the night. The commercial lodging industry wasn't thrilled about that option.
It also
Property
served as an
laws tightened
emergency
through the
shelter where a
1920s.
family could sleep
Motor cars
safely on the
replaced
absolute
foot
coldest
travel,
nights of winter
and
or
a
the hottest
person
days of
sleeping
summer.
in a fence corner
Modern building
went from being
engineers
called
refer to
a
this as
traveler
passive
to being
thermal
branded
mass
with an
and
ugly
charged
label.
$30,000
Two
to
different
design it into a
terms for
modern
the exact
house.
same human being, with a whole commercial industry standing right between them. That was borrowing a wooden fence. This next one involves borrowing a harvest stack. Number
Here is
11,
our third
the
pause in the
haystack
narrative,
burrow.
and I owe you an
Farm
honest
kids
admission.
throughout the 1920s
The very
and
first
30s
shelter I ever
slept
built completely
beside
on my
large
own was when I
haystacks
was
during high
15 years
summer
old.
and used them
It
for
was a
emergency
cold,
shelter
rainy
in the
spring
winter.
night.
You burrow deep in the side and pull the loose hay back over the opening. Your trapped body heat, combined with the mild warmth of the decaying organic matter, creates a surprisingly warm pocket. Historical oral records from the 9970s feature older farm hands remembering this as a complete routine night's rest. Then agricultural insurance companies began writing policies that excluded liability for anyone injured around stored livestock feed. Soon after, motorized balers replaced loose open haystacks with tightly compressed rectangular blocks that you cannot burrow into. No, they outlawed the habit directly. The insurance industry and machinery manufacturer simply made sure the option vanished. That is how market shifts work. No grand conspiracy required, just routine business. From a warm haystack to a warm wooden wrapper, this next shelter is made from a tree's own natural jacket. Number 10, the bark slab shelter. Sheets of elm or birch bark were peeled in large panels during late spring when the sap was running freely. Dried flat
Bend
under
the
heavy
tops
stones,
inward to
and then
overlap.
lashed to a timber pole
Travelers
frame
on the
in
westward
winter to
trails
form
adopted the method for
weatherproof
quick
walls
shelter.
and roof
Two
panels.
people could build one in an
Indigenous
hour without
people
needing an
shared
axe
this
if they had a
technique
good
with
knife.
early fur trappers
And the
who
technique was
passed it
dismissed
on
as
to early
primitive
settlers
and scrubbed
who
from
taught
official
it to
field
their
manuals.
children. Then a generation came along that
From a dome
forgot
of
to
saplings
pass
to a
it
shelter
down
made
because
from
their
what you
kids
drove
slept
in
in
on.
heated frame cabins.
Number 7.
My grandpa
The
noted
overturned
this
wagon.
technique in his journal back in the summer of 948 after peeling the bark himself, recording that the thick elm panels were sturdy
windproof
enough to
shelter
lean
established
right
in under
against
10
a
minutes.
frame like
Today,
modern
most
plywood.
drivers caught in a stranded
Buying a
vehicle during a
utility top
whiteout
today
run the
will
engine
cost
until
you
the gas
20
tank hits
bucks.
empty.
Gathering a slab of natural bark cost your ancestors a single afternoon. That was overhead shelter. This next one sits right under your feet. Number 9. As a root stream weather sanctuaries. Virtually every old homestead featured one, a chamber dug 4 to 6 feet down in the dirt with thick walls and an earthen roof, where the ground naturally holds a stable temperature between 35 and 55 degrees
the long
Fahrenheit
fire.
all year
Take
long
2 heavy
without a
logs about
single
12
watt
feet
of
long
power.
and lay them completely
Built primarily to
parallel
store
on the ground.
potatoes, carrots,
and let
and
your bed
cabbage,
roll down
it also
alongside it.
served as emergency shelter where a family could sleep safely
This isn't a
on the
small cooking
absolute
fire.
coldest nights of winter or the hottest days of summer. Modern build engineers refer to this as passive thermal mass and charge $30,000 to design it into a modern house. Your great-grandmother referred to it as the root cellar and dug
Your
it out with a
great-grandfather
shovel.
lit one every single
Here
night
is
on his
our
trap
third
line
pause
for
in the
40
narrative,
years.
and I owe you an honest admission. The very first shelter I ever built completely on my own was when I was 15 years old. It was a cold, rainy spring night, and the roof caved in on me right in the middle of the dark. Soaked to the skin, I walked all the way back to the house, shivering uncontrollably. My grandfather stood on the porch and laughed at me for a solid minute before handing me a pair of dry wool socks. You do not master these skills from reading words off a page. You learn them by trying, messing up, and figuring it out. Let us keep moving down the list. Number 8, the bent sapling dome. Native peoples across the plains and basins utilized this design for thousands of years. You drive a circle of flexible green saplings in the ground, bend the tops inward to overlap, last them securely into a structural dome, and cover the exterior with animal hides, bark, or woven brush and grass. Travelers on the westward trail adopted the method for quick shelter. 2 people could build one in an hour without needing an axe if they had a good knife. But during the late 19th century, government policies actually forced the people who invented these structures into permanent frame housing, and the technique was dismissed as primitive and scrubbed from official field manuals. Settlers continued building the exact same frame
That handles the
under
heat
a different
source.
name.
And this
The
next
terminology
trick is what you
changed,
pack into
but
the
the
walls
physics
once you have
stayed
a frame.
identical. From a dome of saplings to a shelter made from what you drove in on. Number 7, the overturned wagon. Prairie traveler caught out in a sudden winter blizzard didn't panic. They unhitched their horses, secured them in a sheltered drawer, tipped the wooden wagon over on
The
its
Sunday
side
paper
to face,
provided that insulation
directly
for
into the
free.
wind, and packed
And
a
it still
dense
does
nest of
today.
hay and wool blankets between the wagon bed and the ground. The wagon was already a pre-built wall and roof. Anyone who could tip it over had a windproof shelter established
2
in
bodies
under
sharing a
10
sheltered
minutes.
space instantly doubled the
Today,
total heat output.
most drivers
Modern
caught in
commercial
a
culture
stranded
eventually
vehicle
labeled
during
that
a
setup
white
as crude
outrun
or
the engine
uncomfortable.
until the gas tank hits empty, leaving them at risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. Your great-grandmother would have known instantly which side of the vehicle to drop against the wind. Nobody taught you that simple logic, and that missing knowledge is the real loss. That was a mobile windbreak. This next method is a fire that keeps you warm through the whole night. Number 6, the long fire. You take 2 heavy logs about 12 feet long and lay them completely parallel on the ground with just a hand's width of space between them. You build your fire down the length of that narrow channel and lay your bed roll down alongst it. This isn't a small cooking fire, it is a heat source, the entire length of your body that burns slow and steady. Northern trappers called it the split, log fire. It burns through the night with only a single adjustment at midnight, keeping you warm on frozen ground with no overhead shelter
1849,
required.
That his own father
State
worked a
forestry
winter
officials
line
today
with a
would
hunting
hand you
hound
a
that
steep
slept
fine
curled
for
across his
building one
feet
on public
with his
land because it
100
leaves
watts
a
of basic
long burn mark
thermodynamics.
on the earth.
Heating companies
Your
simply don't want you
great-grandfather lit
realizing you
one
carry an
every
internal
single night
stove
on his
everywhere
trap
you go.
line for 40 years, not because he was careless, but because he needed to stay warm and there wasn't a store selling him portable gas
And you paid
canisters.
out of pocket for every
That
single
handles the
replacement.
heat source.
Number 3
This
is the
next trick is
foundational
what you
loss that
pack
made
in the
all
walls
those other
once you have a
commercial
frame.
trades possible.
Number 5,
3, reading the
newspaper
ground before you
insulation.
set up shelter.
During
Every
the
single
height of the
survival
Great
build listed so
Depression
far
in
is completely useless if you
1932,
erect it in the
when
wrong
a
location.
quarter of the country was out of work, families stuffed layers of newspaper, 6 to 8 inches thick into the walls of unfinished shacks,
Rule
sealed
1.
drafty
Always
cracks in tar
position on a
paper
south-facing
cabins,
slope in
and
the
laid it
northern
beneath
hemisphere to catch
floorboards.
maximum ambient
They
warmth.
called a wrapped
Rule
bundle
2.
of newsprint a makeshift blanket and wore it inside their coats. Dead air trapped between layers of paper provides some of the best free insulation known to thermal physics. Modern fiberglass insulation operates on the exact same principle,
Dropping
wrapped in a
temperatures 10
colorful
to 15
jacket and
degrees
sold
lower
for $4
than a
per
ridge
square foot.
just 20 feet
the
above
Sunday
you.
paper provided that insulation
Rule
for
3.
free, and it still does today. Insulation isn't a retail product, it is a physical principle. Somebody simply packaged the principle and sold it back to you. Warm walls are great, but this next trick relies on a warm body right beside you. Number 4, shared body heat. Chappers routinely shared a single bedroll. Wilderness shepherds slept along their working dogs. And settler families bunked 4 to a mattress, feet tucked together in the center, in rooms where the hearth fire had died down to low coals. A single human body radiates roughly 100 watts of constant thermal energy all night long. Two bodies sharing a sheltered space instantly double the total heat output. Modern commercial culture eventually labeled that setup as crude or uncomfortable, selling everyone on private bedrooms and central heating units instead. My grandfather noted in his journal back in 949 that his own father worked a winter line with a hunting hound that slept curled across feet, and neither one of them suffered from the cold in 15 winters. This isn't an outdated habit. It is 100 watts of basic thermodynamics. Heating companies simply don't want you to realize you carry an internal stove everywhere you go. Two more left. And number 3 is the core skill mentioned earlier that fewer than 100 survival instructors nationwide still teach correctly.
Keep your outer shell separated
Here
from your
is
inner
our
layers
final
when sitting near a
pause,
fire,
looking at
so
the
moisture
entire
doesn't
board.
melt and soak
The gear
inward.
manufacturer
Choose
took
wool
the
over
tent.
cotton
The
every single
utility
time,
companies
because
took the
wool
hearth
retains
fire.
its insulating
The insurance
properties when
industry
damp,
took the haystack
whereas wet
shelter.
cotton drains
The forestry
heat rapidly.
authorities restricted the long fire.
Retail gear brands
and you
will gladly
paid
sell
out
you a
of pocket
$200
for
synthetic
every
base
single
layer that accomplishes
replacement.
the exact same thermal task
Number
an
3
old-fashioned
is
wool
the
layer did a
foundation
century ago
loss
for
that
loose
made
change.
all those other commercial trades possible. Number 3, reading the ground before you set up shelter. Every single survival build listed so far is completely useless if you erect it in the wrong location. Fewer than 100 instructors teach this discipline properly anymore because you can't sell it in an outdoor store. Rule 1. Always position on a south-facing slope in the northern hemisphere to catch maximum ambient warmth. Rule 2. Never build at the absolute bottom of a drainage valley or draw because heavy cold air settles there overnight, dropping temperatures 10 to 15 degrees lower than a ridge just 20 feet above you. Rule 3. Clear out from under widow. Makers, those dead hanging tree branches
brings us
overhead
straight
that
to
can
number 1,
snap and fall
the
without
single
warning in the
principle
night.
that holds all the
Rule
others
4.
together.
Always seek dry ground. Damp earth drains heat from a human body 6 times faster than dry dirt. Your great-grandfather could evaluate a campsite in 3 minutes flat and sleep warm all night. A person today can pitch a $400 techno tent in a cold air sink and freeze. The location itself is the true shelter. Everything else you build is just extra trimming. And this next one is the personal shelter you are already wearing. Number 2, dry clothing is your primary shelter layer. Wearing damp cotton against your skin in 30-degree weather will induce hypothermia before sunrise. Every trapper, logger, and field hand in this country understood that fact down to their bones. Always change into a completely dry pair of socks before laying down to sleep. Even if you are crawling in a snow trench, keep your outer shell separated from your inner layers. When sitting near a fire, so moisture doesn't melt and soak inward. Choose wool over cotton every single time because wool retains its insulating properties when damp, whereas wet cotton drains heat rapidly.
Ate a hot meal at a
Retail
farm
gear
11 miles
brands
down the
will
trail.
gladly sell you a
And lived to be 81
$200
years
synthetic
old.
base layer that accomplishes the exact same thermal task an old-fashioned wool layer did a century ago for loose change. Your clothes are the personal shelter that stays with you if the structure you built collapses. As my grandfather put it plainly, dry keeps you warm, wet makes you dead. Learn that difference long before you ever need it. 4 separate skills, every single one of them completely free, and every single one replaced by a commercial product that costs you money. Which brings us straight to number 1, the single principle that holds all the others together. Number 1, you carry your true shelter inside your
The other
mind,
person
not
is
on your back.
completely independent of the
That old
market.
timber cutter walked
That
out
is
of
what
that
was
logging
taken from
camp
you,
back
not
in
just the physical
936 with nothing more than a wool coat and a hand axe with no roof waiting for him anywhere. Yet, he slept comfortably for 2 nights at
One of them
30.
didn't.
4 below 0
That is
because
how a
his
practical
grandfather had
skill
shown him
dies
the
out,
principle just
quietly,
once when he was
one
9 years
generation at a
old,
time.
and he never let
Official
that
records showed
knowledge
that
slip
cold weather
away.
training programs
He
eventually
wasn't
came full
destitute.
circle,
He was
recognizing those
entirely
traditional wilderness
self-reliant.
techniques again by the mid-1990s.
There is a
They
massive
simply don't
difference
advertise it.
between a person who owns a $100 tent and a person who possessed the knowledge to sleep safely without one. The
Now, hear
difference
me
is
clearly.
that only one
I
of
am
those
not
people can
trying to
be
sell you
continuously
on
sold
panic
something.
or
The
preach
other person
doom
is
and gloom.
completely independent
Great.
of the market.
I am simply sharing
That is what
practical
was taken
history,
from
not
you,
giving medical
not
or
just the
legal
physical
advice.
shelter,
Some of the
but the
historical
independence
methods
of
described
never
here run
needing
up
to buy one. That timber cutter walked out of the woods on a Thursday morning, ate a hot meal at a farm 11 miles down the trail, and lived to be 81 years old. He raised 4 sons and passed the snow trench technique
Whether
down
that
to
is
every
building an
single one
open,
of them.
long fire
3
on
of those
public
sons
lands
taught it to their
or
own
resting
kids.
near private
One of them
boundary
didn't.
fences.
That is how a practice
I am
skill
simply
dies
laying
out
out
quietly,
where those
one
lines were
generation at a
drawn
time.
so you can make your
Official
own
records show
informed
that
choices.
cold weather training programs
Great.
eventually
I am
came
simply
full
sharing
circle,
practical history,
recognizing
not giving
those
medical
traditional
or legal
wilderness
advice.
techniques again
Some of the
by the
historical methods described here run
mid-1990s.
up-
Just
They
pick one
simply
trick to
don't
start
advertise
with.
it because there is
Don't
zero
try to
profit
master all
in a person
25
who
at
knows
once.
how
Just
to
pick one
survive
this week.
outdoors on their own, only in someone who is terrified to try. Now hear me clearly. I am not trying to sell you on panic or preach doom and gloom. I am simply sharing practical history, not giving medical or legal advice. Some of the historical methods described here run up against local regulations, depend on where you live, whether that is building an open long fire on public lands or resting near private boundary fences. I am simply laying out where those lines were drawn so you can make your own informed choices. Just pick one trick to start with. Don't try to master all 20. 5 at once. Just pick one this week. Try raking the glowing coals in a wood stove in a tight mound tonight. Cover them with ash and see if you can rekindle the room with a strip of paper in the morning. Cut a small mat of pine boughs behind the shed. Lie down on it in your coat on a cold afternoon and feel how quick the frozen ground stops draining your body heat. Go read the wind in your own backyard. Walk the perimeter in a coat and identify the naturally sheltered corners. Start with just one. I constructed a snow trench beside my cabin last February when it hit 12 below zero out here. I laid boughs across the floor, kept a small fire burning out front, and slept 6 solid hours without a synthetic sleeping bag. It was
Drop a
cold,
comment
but I was
below and let
fully
me know.
alive and
Did your own
significantly
grandparents
warmer
ever
than
sleep
sitting out
somewhere
on the
that
porch.
modern neighbors would scratch their
Drop
heads
a
at
comment
today?
below and let me know. Did your own grandpa ever sleep somewhere that modern neighbors would scratch their heads at today? A hay barn, a fence corner,
The technique
a
that gets
snowbank,
mentioned the
or a root
most
cellar?
is the exact
The
one
technique
I
that
will
gets
build
mentioned the
and
most is the
demonstrate
exact
in the
one
next
I will
video.
build and demonstrate in the next video. Your grandfather knew every single one of these principles. Life simply got in the way before he had the chance to pass them down to you.
Your grandfather
now that
knew
knowledge
every single
belongs
one
to
of these
you again.
principles.
This
Life
is a
simply got in the way before
multi-generational
he had the
library that
chance to pass
closes
them
one
down to you.
old-timer at a time.
Now that
and you are
knowledge
now one of the
belongs to you
folks holding the
again.
key. Next time we meet, we will cover a $2 pantry item that great. Grandmothers used to seal drafty wall cracks for winter, an item the commercial taint industry made sure folks forgot existed
Next
by
time
the
we
late
meet,
1950s,
we will cover a $2
but that a
pantry
Midwest
item that
University study
great-grandmothers used to
confirmed
seal drafty
outperforms
wall
modern
cracks for
caulk
winter.
on aged wood.
It costs $2.
It costs
sits
$2.
on store shelves right
Sits
now.
on store shelves
and
right
works
now and
perfectly.
works perfectly. If any of this felt like an inheritance
If any of this
that
felt
should
like
have
an
been yours
inheritance
all
that should have been
along,
yours all
hit
along,
that subscribe button
hit that
and stick
subscribe
around.
button and stick around.
We aren't finished
We
yet.
aren't finished yet.
25
skills at a time.
We are bringing the old library
back.
Keep the
Keep
traditional,
the traditional ways
that kept our people alive.